Hello. Happy Monday night. Welcome to GMR. We're going to do the whole book of Esther tonight. Oh, are you ready? Who's going to be the first to hop on tonight? Happy Monday. Welcome to GMR. Hello, Amy. You get the cookie. Happy cookie night. Hey, Farron. Hey, Debbie. I'm so excited about this night, y'all. I'm so excited to do the book of Esther. I have got so many really cool favorites in the Bible, and it's really hard to pick one. But if I had to say, Esther's probably one of my all-time favorite books of the Bible. Hey, Mom! Hey, everybody! So I'm listening to a song. I just was getting ready after I studied, and I pulled up on the YouTube's songs for Purim. Hey, Penny! Hey, Trisha! Hello! So I pulled these songs, and this is the cutest little song. I don't even know what they're saying because it's in Hebrew. But it's like this little kid band or I don't know what it is. But they are so stinking cute. Hey, Samantha. Hey, Heather. And they're singing in Hebrew, and it's a song for Purim, and it's like... So after we get through this whole entire book, you're going to see why this song is so like this, you know, because it's so fun, and the holiday of Purim is fun, and it comes from this very, very, very poignant story of Esther. So I cannot wait to get this started. So everybody keep jumping in. So here is what I'm going to need from y'all tonight, okay? I know that Facebook has some delays, so that's okay, but I'm gonna expect a lot of comments here, okay? I'm gonna expect a lot of hearts and likes and laughs and all of these things, because this story is meant to be told, and I'm turning off the cute little boys singing in Hebrew about Purim because I have to read something to you. This story is told with great enthusiasm. Okay, so before all of our GMR normal introductions, I have to tell you this, okay? So this story is always told with great enthusiasm, because the holiday of Purim is a festive time, and it's very much centered around children, okay? So this is basically like, I hate to even compare it to this, because we celebrate Halloween, and to me Halloween is just evil. Hate it, don't really like it. Yes, I carried my kids around and they dressed up and things like that, and we went trick-or-treating, but I absolutely hate Halloween, okay, because there's just so much evil, you know, connected with it. But this Esther is very much, Purim is very much kind of like a Halloween of sorts, minus all the evil mess, that they dress up in costumes, they have a big party, and they tell the whole Megillah. Have you ever heard that phrase before? The whole Megillah. All right, so I'm going to give you, I'm going to find where I was first. I'm going to give you the definition of the whole Megillah. This is just fun to me. Hey, Holly. Hey, Christine. Y'all stick with me tonight. Don't lose me. Hey, Shannon. And give me lots of hearts and likes. And I hope that I can see them tonight, because I see some comments that I don't see any hearts or anything. But if you do it, just do it, okay? And I'll see them later. But I need to see as much feedback tonight as possible. This is one of those nights. This is a interactive thing here. I need y'all to be interactive with me. Okay, so the whole Megillah means the entirety of something, especially something that is an entanglement of intricate arrangements or a long, complicated story. Now hang with me, okay? The whole Megillah is an American idiom taken from Yiddish. In Hebrew, the Megillah is one of 5 books read on special Jewish feast days. The book of Esther, read on Purim, is especially long and complicated. A tedious and complicated story came to be called the Ganze Megillah in Yiddish, which translates as the whole Megillah. I absolutely love that. So tonight, y'all, we are going to read the whole Megillah, okay? We are going to do what they would do at a Jewish Purim festival. And it is read, I've been to Purim several times. Hey, Nicole. Hey, Joanne. I have been to a Purim festival several times at the Messianic Synagogue here in our, well, not exactly local area, but kind of local to me. Roswell, about an hour or so away from me. And I love, love, love going because it's just so much fun. So what they do is they don't only read the whole Megillah, okay, they will act it out, all right? And what they do is as you walk through the door, they give you these noisemakers. Hey, Amy. Hey, Annette. They give you these noisemakers. Have y'all ever seen? They're called grogs. I think it's what they call them. And they have a little stick and you spin it around and it goes, wah, 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 it makes these noises. And so they give these out to everybody that walks in, right? And when they get up and read it, everybody is instructed that whenever you hear the name Mordecai or Esther, everybody cheers. Everybody cheers and makes wah, and they make the noisemakers and they woohoo and all that stuff. And then when you hear the name Haman, everybody goes boo, and they do their noisemakers boo, boo, and everybody all through the entire story. Okay, it's hysterical. Okay, it is so funny. Hey Cheryl, hey Jessica. Did I already say hey to you, Jessica? Anyway, hey again. Oh my goodness. So it is the funnest thing to be a part of. But this story, if you've never read through the entire book of Esther, you're going to do it tonight. We're going to do the whole Megillah. So, welcome to Glorious Marriage Revolution. We are determined and dedicated to follow God as He raises up generations of women who know how to fight the real enemy. If you are not part of our Thursday night prayer time, please join us. Our Inner Court Sanctuary meets right here on this page every Thursday night at 8 o'clock to pray for you. If you have a prayer request, send it to prayer@gloriousmarriagerevolution.com. We have 3-minute pops every morning, a 3-minute quick inspirational devotion and prayer time every morning when they do post right. It's supposed to be at 6 a.m., but we will eventually post one every single day because sometimes Facebook and me don't act right. Like this morning, I forgot. And I got on here at like 9:30 or something like that. So anyway, it is what it is. All right, so the biggest thing before we proceed, I need you to hear me. Hear me, hear me, hear me. If you did not see the announcement that Melissa and I made the other day, our conference has been postponed. Okay, if you live in a bubble and you don't know about the coronavirus, well, there's this, freak out mode that everybody's in right now. And if you don't know it, then you live under a rock. But anyway, so we are choosing to comply and be very conscientious and cautious of everyone and their families and their health and their travel plans and their finances and expenses. And so we are going to postpone the conference for right now. Okay, we don't have any idea really when we're going to put it back into action, but we will let you know. But for right now, it is canceled, and we are going to do our best this week to find out and get the ball rolling on getting everyone's tickets refunded to them who have already purchased tickets. So if that is you and you've purchased tickets, we will do our very best as soon as we can to refund you that money. Hopefully it's going to work easily with PushPay. We won't have any issues. So I just wanted to let you know that. If you know anybody that doesn't get on here except for on Monday nights, and they're not on the weekly things that we're just on there doing things like that, then let them know for me, because I do realize that there are some people that don't get on Facebook except on Monday nights, and then some people that just do the YouTube thing. So if you have not already spoken with some of your friends about this, please help us to spread the word. We're sad about it too, Farron, but the fact is that God's timing is perfect. There is nothing that took him by surprise, and it's gonna be okay. And when he does make the way clear and he does open the door for us to set things up again, it's going to be just amazing because his timing is perfect. So I'm sad, but I'm not too over the top over it. You know what I'm saying? Because I just trust him. Okay? He is in all things, and we are going to learn that tonight in the book of Esther. Okay, so let's pray. Let's get started. And I hope we get some more people popping on, because tell some people to get on here. I love y'all. Let's get started. Oh, Lord, I am so very thankful to be here tonight with these ladies. And Lord, I ask you to help me as we tell this amazing story from your word. Help us to see it as if we're watching another play, Lord, or watching another movie. Help it come to life and jump off the page into our hearts tonight, Lord Jesus. Help us to see the characters just take form and let us see their faces and feel their emotions, and help us to know that your word is alive and active and sharper than any two-edged sword, and that you are always at work in our lives. We give you praise and glory. Holy Spirit, tell this story tonight. In Jesus' name, amen and amen. Hey, Amy, how is everybody doing tonight? I hope you're good. I still don't see any hearts, but I'm going to trust that later when I go back, I'm going to see them because I don't see them tonight. Okay, so this is another great, think of it like a Broadway musical, y'all. That's just how my heart resonates with things. Like, I can see it in action. I see the stories and I can just see it, And so this is like the curtain is rising on Susa, the province of Susa, which is huge, by the way. If you go back, and we're going to read that in just a second, it's huge, by the way. And then the story begins to be woven of a little captive Jewish girl named Hadassah, also known as Esther, which was her Persian name. Now, the Jewish people at this time were under Persian captivity, under the reign of, and it says, King Xerxes. His name was actually Ahasuerus. Okay, so when you see Xerxes, and some of your translations may actually say Ahasuerus. Okay, so mine just actually says Xerxes, so we're just going to go with that tonight, just to be clear. But we are seeing this story come around as the Jewish people are held captive by the Persians. Now, they've been in captivity for a really long time, okay? And they have kind of grown accustomed, which is a theme that we see with the Hebrew people in the Old Testament, is wherever they were taken and held captive, they were there for so long that they ended up kind of taking on the customs and traditions of the people that they were held captive by. And so that's what had happened here in the Persians. They had become very comfortable in their captivity. Now, that right there will preach all by itself, okay? Because sometimes we can be living outside the will of God in a captive place, held bondage to something, but we become comfortable in that place. And we're comfortable in our captivity. We're comfortable living outside the will of God. And that's kind of where the Jewish people were in this time when Esther was written. Esther is the only book of the Bible, and many of you may already know this, but Esther is the only book of the Bible that God's name is not mentioned. You will see no references to sacrifices made to God or any references made to the law of God, any of that. You will not see that in this, but you see God's fingerprints everywhere. And there's actually a theological term for that, seeing God's fingerprints everywhere, and it's called providence. Okay, I want you to listen to this. This is the actual meaning, theological meaning of the word providence. The means by which God directs all things, both animate and inanimate, seen and unseen, good and evil, toward a worthy purpose, which means His will must finally prevail. It means the hand of God is in the glove of human events. Now, when people say, why does a good God allow such bad things to happen? There are a lot of people asking this question right now. Why is God allowing this? Why has God allowed a disease and a virus to take over and cause such trouble throughout the globe? It isn't just in our country, it's everywhere. Why has God allowed this? Well, right here in the definition of providence, it says He directs all things, both animate and inanimate, seen and unseen, good and evil. He does not create evil, but evil is in this world through the fall. And so God will take good and evil, and His hand is in the glove of human events, and He is manipulating, bringing every action into play for His glory and for His purposes. And it says right here, His will must finally prevail. It doesn't matter what comes at us. It doesn't matter what comes our way or through what happens in our country. It doesn't, you know what? Before we even get to the whole Megillah, it doesn't matter who's in office, really, ultimately, because, you've seen the things that come on Facebook, you've seen 100 times, but it's true. It doesn't matter who the president is. Jesus is still King of Kings and Lord of Lords. His will finally prevail, and we have to trust Him. Even if it's someone in office you don't agree with, it's okay. He's still in control. So before I get too ahead of myself, what I put as the title for this video is God makes great doors swing on little hinges. Write that down. Write that down. In fact, write it in your Bible at the very introduction of Esther. Write it there. God makes great doors swing on little hinges. God makes great doors swing on little hinges. Isn't that awesome? Don't you love that? Because as we see in this story we're about to find out, Esther and her cousin Mordecai were little bitty hinges, really, in the grand scheme of where they were, held in captivity, and God used those little hinges to swing open some really great doors. So that's going to be the theme kind of going throughout the book of Esther. Now here we go. We're going to start reading it. I didn't bring my glasses, so y'all help me, okay? Just pray that I can see what I'm doing, okay? All right, so now let's get started. Let's get the party started. All right. This is what happened. Now I'm reading from the NIV tonight. So we're going to read and talk, read and talk, read and talk. Okay, you ready? All right. So in your little hearts, I want you to pretend that you've got a noisemaker. And in your little hearts, every time I say Mordecai and Esther, just go, yay, cheer. And every time I say Haman, I want you to go boo and do your little noisemaker and hiss and all that stuff. Okay, let's make this fun. All right. This is what happened during the time of Xerxes, Ahasuerus. The Xerxes, who ruled over 127 provinces stretching from India to Kush. At that time, King Xerxes reigned from his royal throne in the citadel of Susa. And in the 3rd year of his reign, he gave a banquet. Now, don't let all these words run together in your brain. Think about this. He gave a banquet for all his nobles and officials, and this is a big province, a big kingdom he had here, okay? So he gave a banquet for all his nobles and officials, the military leaders of Persia and Media, the princes, and the nobles of the provinces were present. It's a lot of people. Get the next verse. For a full 180 days. That is almost 6 months that him and these leaders turned up. Almost 6 months. He displayed the vast wealth of his kingdom and the splendor and glory of his majesty. When these days were over, the almost 6 months were over, the king gave another banquet, lasting 7 days, in the enclosed garden of the king's palace, for all the people from the least to the greatest who were in the citadel of Susa. The garden had hangings of white and blue linen, fastened with cords of white linen and purple material to silver rings on marble pillars. Are you getting an image in your brain? Because, be visual with me for a minute. Very elaborate here, okay? There were couches of gold and silver. Couches of gold and silver. What? On a mosaic pavement of porphyry, marble, mother of pearl, and other costly stones. Good grief. Wine was served in goblets of gold, each one different from the other, and the royal wine was abundant, in keeping with the king's command. With the king's liberality. By the king's command, each guest was allowed to drink in his own way. In other words, everybody could drink as much as they wanted to. Everybody was lit. Okay? Lord have mercy. For the king instructed all the wine stewards to serve each man what he wished. So, you want more? Okay, here you go. Whoa! Wowzer. So, everybody was drunk. Everybody was partying for a long time. Okay. Queen Vashti also gave a banquet for the women in the royal palace of King Xerxes. Most of the time, men and women, separated. Well, except for some women. Okay. On the 7th day, when King Xerxes was in high spirits from the wine, he commanded the 7 eunuchs who served him, and then it gives the names of the eunuchs, to bring before him Queen Vashti. wearing her royal crown in order to display her beauty to the people and the nobles, for she was lovely to look at. Now, a lot of scholars and all agree, really, that he kind of wanted her to come out, and it was kind of a risque kind of a presentation he wanted to give of his queen. He wanted to show her off, and she did not want to display herself in that way. And I'm saying, whoop, whoop, to Vashti, go girl, fist bump. I'm all about, she was like, So, but when the attendants delivered the king's command, Queen Vashti refused to come. She said, no, I am not going to parade myself in front of a bunch of drunken men because you told me to. No, not going to do it. So she refused. Then the king became furious and burned with anger. Now he was embarrassed and he was drunk. Since it was customary for the king to consult experts in matters of law and justice, he spoke with the wise men who understood the times. That just kind of makes me want to roll my eyes. Okay, who understood the times and were closest to the king. And he gives the names of those that were there and those that had special access to the king and were highest in the kingdom. Verse 15. According to law, he asks, what must be done to Queen Vashti? She has not obeyed the command of the king that the eunuchs have taken to her. Then Memucan replied in the presence of the king and the nobles, Queen Vashti has done wrong, and not only against the king, listen to this, but also against all the nobles and all the peoples of the provinces of King Xerxes. Okay, so not only did she embarrass you, she's done wrong to all of us. For the queen's conduct will become known to all the women, and so they will despise their husbands and say, King Xerxes commanded Queen Vashti to be brought before him, but she would not come. This very day, the Persian and Median women of the nobility who have heard about the queen's conduct will respond to all the king's nobles in the same way. There will be no end of disrespect and discord. I'm laughing about that already because it's like, oh, wow. These men were like, our women are going to buck us if you allow her to get away with that. We can't have that. These women will be running rampant all over this place. There'll be discord like no other. That'll be great. We can't let that happen. That just really cracks me up. Therefore, if it pleases the king, let him issue a royal decree and let it be written in the laws of Persia and Media, which cannot be repealed, that Vashti is never again to enter the presence of King Xerxes. Also let the king give her royal position to someone else who's better than her. Just cracking up. Then when the king's edict is proclaimed throughout all his vast realm, all the women will respect their husbands from the least to the greatest. Now that's going to make you respect your husband. Really? The king and his nobles were pleased with this advice, so the king did as Memucan proposed. Again, remember, he was drunk. He sent dispatches to all parts of the kingdom, to each province in his own script, to each people in its own language, proclaiming in each person's tongue that every man should be ruler over his own household. Wow. Now, chapter 2. Later, when the king sobered up, that's my paraphrase, when his anger subsided, he remembered. Okay, so he had sobered up, he got lit for a long time, like over 6 months the first time, then threw a whole new banquet for 7 days. So this boy had been drunk for a long time, and he finally sobered up a little bit, and he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what he had decreed about her. So he had gone from partying to Prozac. Like, he was depressed, he didn't like what was happening, and he was all down in the dumps. And everybody around him, his personal attendants, proposed, let a search be made for beautiful young virgins for the king. And everybody's like, ooh, king, doesn't that sound good? Let the king appoint commissioners in every province of his realm to bring all these beautiful girls into the harem at the citadel of Susa. Let them be placed under the care of Haggai, the king's eunuch, who is in charge of the women, and let beauty treatments be given to them. Then let the girl who pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti. This advice appealed to the king, and he allowed it. Now, there was in the citadel of Susa a Jew of the tribe of Benjamin named Mordecai. Yay! son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, who had been carried into exile from Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, among those taken captive with Jehoiakim, king of Judah. Now, it is believed, but I can't say this with 100% certainty, that they believe that Mordecai was part of the captivity that came over with Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. That's believed. I can't prove it though, but that is something that is believed. Okay. Mordecai had a cousin named Hadassah, whom, and we're, yay, Hadassah, Esther, whom he had brought up because she had neither father nor mother. She had been orphaned. This girl, who was also known as Esther, was lovely in form and features, and Mordecai had taken her as his own daughter when her father and mother died. Now you're going to notice that the author of Esther, which again, we don't know who authored it, we don't know who wrote it, was very beautiful. Really wants us to understand how beautiful Esther was. When the king's order and edict had been proclaimed, many girls were brought to the citadel of Susa and put under the care of Hegai. Esther also was taken to the king's palace and entrusted to Hegai, who had charge of the harem. The girl pleased him and won his favor. Now, a eunuch. Just to clarify, if you're not familiar with what a eunuch actually was, they actually castrated men, servants. They would castrate them so that they could have no sexual arousal, that they could not do anything because they were in the king's palace. They were over the king's concubines and his harem, and only he was supposed to touch them. So if there were male attendants over females, there would be sexual arousal, there would be connections, there would be what the king would perceive as inappropriate behavior from one of his servants to another. And so they would castrate these men so that there could be no sexual arousal. So here, there was no sexual anything toward Esther. God, even though it's not mentioned here, was orchestrating his favor on Esther's life. It says here that the girl pleased him and won his favor. That is something we are going to see resounding through the next several verses. Immediately, okay, Hegai had all these other women in his care as well, but immediately he was attracted to and had favor on Esther. Immediately, he provided her with beauty treatments and special food. He assigned to her 7 maids selected from the king's palace and moved her and her maids into the best place in the harem. Now, this is just the eunuch that had found favor on her, okay? He just loved her. There was something about her that drew people to her. We'll see that in just a moment. Esther had not revealed her nationality and family background because Mordecai had forbidden her to do so. Every day he walked back and forth near the courtyard of the harem to find out how Esther was doing and what was happening to her. She was very loved by Mordecai, and she loved him very much. And Mordecai stayed very close to wherever Esther was within the palace. We're going to see that in a minute too. And he wanted to keep tabs on her through servants back and forth sending messages, and he wanted to make sure that she was okay. Now in verse 12, before a girl's turn came to go to King Xerxes, she had to complete 12 months of beauty treatments prescribed for the women, 6 months with oil of myrrh and 6 with perfumes and cosmetics. Now, if you're a girly girl, that don't sound like a bad gig right there. I mean, I'm just saying, you got to go through 12 months of beauty treatments, and I'm sure there's some massages in there somewhere, and they're going to rub me down with some oils and makeup. And we're like, oh, if you're a girly girl, this gets your attention. Don't sound half bad. But wouldn't want to have to go through what they went through after that 12 months. But anyway, and this is how she would go to the king. Anything she wanted was given her to take with her from the harem to the king's palace. In the evening, she would go there, and in the morning return to another part of the harem to the care of Shashgaz, these names, the king's eunuch, who was in charge of the concubines. Okay, now you went from being a specialty treated virgin, all right, and you were held under the care of Hegai, all right, and then when the king called you and it was time for you to go be reviewed and looked at by the king, he probably lay with you, You were no longer a virgin. Then you became a concubine, and you went to a whole nother area under the care of another eunuch. So, yeah. Beauty treatment's not so... You know what I'm saying? Ugh. Anyway. Okay, so... Then she would not return to the king unless he was pleased with her and summoned her by name. When the turn came for Esther, the girl Mordecai had adopted, the daughter of his uncle Abihail, I'm not sure how to say that, to go to the king, she asked for nothing other than what Haggai, the king's eunuch who was in charge of the harem, suggested. And it doesn't say what he suggested, it just says she listened to him. And did what he said. And Esther won the favor of everyone who saw her. There you see that beautiful supernatural law of attraction. Have you ever you heard the teaching of the law of attraction? It's a worldly teaching. It's like, oh, if you do this, the universe will bring this back to you and blah blah blah. My God created the universe. Okay, so as a child of the Most High God, when you are walking with Him, you have His favor on your life, and you have the supernatural law of attraction that He put into place because He has His favor on your life, and He attracts things to you because He's good to you and because He's faithful and because of Him, not you. She was taken to King Xerxes in the royal residence in the 10th month, the month of Tebet, in the 7th year of his reign. Now, the king was attracted to Esther more than any of the other women, and she won his favor and approval more than any of the other virgins. So he set a royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. And the king gave a great banquet, Esther's banquet, for all his nobles and officials. He proclaimed the holiday throughout the provinces and distributed gifts with royal liberality. Now, really quickly, let's just insert a read between the lines scene here. Again, like we did with Ruth, can you put yourself in Esther's shoes? All her life, she and her cousin who raised her, so he was like a father to her, all her life they had been in captivity. They had only ever been slaves, and it had only ever been her and Mordecai. She was scared to death, but she had no choice. And Mordecai said, do not tell them that you are a Jew. Do not tell them that, because we are captive, and he cannot know that. And a Jew cannot be in the king's palace. Don't tell him. Can you imagine how scared she was? And yet God kept his hand of protection on her. Just put yourself in her shoes for a minute. It's just amazing to me. Now, verse 19. Now, it's believed that between verse 18 and verse 19 that quite some time had passed, perhaps even years had passed between verse 18 and verse 19. Okay? And then it said, and this is something that when I was studying this, I had never even seen this. I've read the book of Esther all the way through. I can't tell you how many times. When the virgins were assembled a second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. I was like, wait, what? They were assembled a second time? So here's the picture that you need to get here, is that kings had thousands of concubines. Didn't matter who the queen was. The queen was the one that was going to give him his royal line of descendants. But he had descendants, hundreds of them, through these concubines, but they weren't the royal descendants. It had to come through the queen. But he only called her when he wanted her. And it's believed that years had passed and she had been queen for some time. And so they were bringing a second round of virgins who had not, like when it came to Esther, no more virgins were called. Okay? But then he was like, oh, they were going to assemble a whole new round of virgins. And Esther was queen. That wasn't going to change. But he got bored with her, apparently. So this is like something that we cannot wrap our brains around, but it happened. This was normal, okay? So when the virgins were assembled a second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. Now, I looked up, why was he sitting at the king's gate? Resoundingly, everyone agrees, Mordecai was everywhere outside the palace. He knew that Esther was inside the palace. He was outside that area, waiting to hear word, waiting to send word, waiting to find out how she was. So we see in chapter 2 where he was outside and near the courtyard of the harem. Now she wasn't part of the harem anymore. Now she was the queen. And so he was outside the king's gate because she was in the royal palace, within the inner courts of the royal palace. And he was there waiting to hear word from her. But Esther had kept secret her family background and nationality, just as Mordecai had told her to do this whole time, for she continued to follow Mordecai's instructions as she had done when he was bringing her up. There was such respect there. Such respect there. During the time Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, listen to this, Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's officers who guarded the doorway, became angry and conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. But Mordecai found out about the plot and told Queen Esther. He never was able to speak with her personally. There was always a runner, a servant, a messenger that sent word to Queen Esther, who in turn reported it to the king, giving credit to Mordecai. Now, Queen Esther told the king, gave credit to Mordecai. Remember that. And when the report was investigated and found to be true, the two officials were hanged on gallows. All this was recorded in the book of the annals in the presence of the king. Remember that. After these events, King Xerxes honored Haman, son of Hammedatha the Agagite, elevating him and giving him a seat of honor higher than that of all the other nobles. It doesn't say why he honored Haman. It just says after these events, he honored him. Haman, boo. Remember, we're saying boo. Yeah, boo in your heart. All the royal officials at the king's gate knelt down and paid honor to Haman, for the king had commanded this concerning him. But Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor. Mordecai, yay! Then the royal officials at the king's gate asked Mordecai, why do you disobey the king's command? Day after day they spoke to him, but he refused to comply. Therefore, they told Haman about it to see whether Mordecai's behavior would be tolerated, for he had told them he was a Jew. In other words, I am a Jewish man. The only one I will bow down to is the God of Israel. I will not bow down to a person. I will not bow down to an earthly king. I will only bow down and pay honor to the God of Israel. And this made Haman mad. Okay, Debbie, I love the thumbs up, thumbs down. I love that. Thank you. When Haman saw that Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor, he was enraged. Yet having learned who Mordecai's people were, he scorned the idea of killing only Mordecai. Like, his hatred went deep. Okay, it went deep. I hope you're seeing this play out on the movie of your mind, or the stage of your mind. Instead, Haman looked for a way to destroy all Mordecai's people, the Jews, throughout the whole kingdom of Xerxes. I mean, he wanted them all dead. Sounds like Hitler, doesn't it? I mean, it's just like crazy. In the 12th year of King Xerxes, in the first month, the month of Nisan, they cast the pur, or poor. It's pronounced different ways. That is the lot, in the presence of Haman, to select a day and month, and the lot fell on the 12th month, the month of Adar. Then Haman said to King Xerxes, listen to this, there is a certain people dispersed and scattered among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom, whose customs are different from those of all other people, and they do not obey the king's laws. It is not in the king's best interest to tolerate them. Listen to this. If it pleases the king, let a decree be issued to destroy them, and I will put 10,000 talents of silver into the royal treasury for the men who carry out this business. So the king took his signet ring from his finger and gave it to Haman, the enemy of the Jews. Keep the money, the king said to Haman, and do with the people as you please. Now, I have to say, King Xerxes, King Ahasuerus, was a doofus. Okay? He had his head in the sand. He didn't care, and he was being manipulated like a little puppet on a string by all those who were around him. Okay? Everything the people around him said, he was like, yeah, that sounds good, sure. Sure, that sounds good. Yeah, you want to kill all those people? A whole entire nation of people? Sure, go ahead. Take my signet ring, which, by the way, gives you all my authority in my name, and do with them what you want to do. Don't worry about the money. Just do with them what you want to do. He's a doofus. Anyway, then on the 13th day of the first month, the royal secretaries were summoned. They wrote out in the script of each province and in the language of each people all Haman's orders to the king's satraps, the governors, and the various provinces and the nobles of the various peoples. These were written in the name of King Xerxes himself and sealed with his own ring, because he had given his authority to Haman. Boo! Okay? Now, dispatches were sent by couriers to all the king's provinces with the order to destroy, kill, and annihilate. Okay, not just kill them, destroy them, annihilate them. I mean, what? Destroy, kill, and annihilate all the Jews. And you know what this makes me think of? Where it says in John, the enemy only comes to kill, steal, and destroy. Hello. The enemy was driving this hatred of God's chosen people. The enemy still drives this same hatred today, and you as believers in Yeshua, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, the Messiah, you and your believing of him have been grafted into Israel, and the enemy hates you with that same kind of passion. He only comes to kill, to steal, and to destroy, with the same spirit that was driving Haman, that wanted to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the Jews. You are grafted into that, and the enemy is still after you today, but you have got the covering of the Almighty on your side. All right, it says he wanted to kill them all, young and old, women and little children, on a single day, the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, and to plunder their goods. Now remember how big his kingdom was. This was going throughout the entire kingdom, okay? A copy of the text of the edict was to be issued as law in every province and made known to the people of every nationality, so they would be ready for that day. Spurred on by the king's command, the couriers went out, and the edict was issued in the citadel of Susa. The king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Susa was bewildered. Everybody else was wondering, where in the world did this come from? And why does Haman have all this power? All right, now, chapter 4. When Mordecai learned of all that had been done, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the city, wailing loudly and bitterly. He went only as far as the king's gate, because no one clothed in sackcloth was allowed to enter in. In every province to which the edict and order of the king came, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and wailing. Many lay in sackcloth and ashes. When Esther's maids and eunuchs came and told her about Mordecai, she was in great distress. At this point, Esther didn't even know what had happened, okay? She sent clothes for him to put on instead of his sackcloth, but he would not accept them. Then Esther summoned Hatak, one of the king's eunuchs, assigned to attend her, and she ordered him to find out what was troubling Mordecai and why. So Hatak went out to Mordecai in the open square of the city in front of the king's gate. Mordecai told him everything that had happened to him, including the exact amount of money Haman had promised to pay into the royal treasury for the destruction of the Jews. He also gave him a copy of the text of the edict for their annihilation, which had been published in Susa, to show Esther and explain it to her. And he told him to urge her to go into the king's presence, to beg for mercy and plead with him for her people. Hatak went back and reported to Esther what Mordecai had said. Can you imagine how Esther felt? Then she instructed him to say to Mordecai, all the king's officials and all the people of the royal provinces know that any man or woman who approaches the king in the inner court without being summoned, the king has but one law, that he be put to death. The only exception to this is for the king to extend the gold scepter to him and spare his life. But it's been 30 days since I was called to go to the king. I can't just go into his presence, she's saying. I'll be killed. I can't just do this. This is a law. When Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back his answer. And y'all have got to remember that even though there's a messenger that's going between the palace and just outside the city gates, these are not like text messages that are going bing from one, bing to the other, bing to one, bing to the other. There was secrecy involved here. There was time allowed to send that servant out, because Esther still had not conveyed that she was a Jew. So it had to be secret. So the messages and the time between getting those messages and waiting and waiting and waiting to hear word was not like us. We have instant messaging where it's bing, 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 bing. And I can talk to somebody clear across the other side of the world in a text message in a second, just a fucking nanosecond. And we're there. Okay, this was not the case. So I can only imagine the distress that's going on in Esther's mind right now. When Esther's words were reported back to Mordecai, he sent back this answer. Do not think. He's given words of wisdom here. He's like, don't get too comfortable there in the palace, little sister girl. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. But you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to royal position for such a time as this. What a often quoted verse of scripture right there. He was saying, "O Hadassah, remember from whence you came. Don't forget that just because you're in the king's palace, if they find out you're a Jew, you're going to die too. And you may have very well come to this position in the palace for such a time as this. Catch yourself. Watch yourself. Be careful." Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai. Go, gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my maids will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went away and carried out all of Esther's instructions. On the 3rd day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the palace in front of the king's hall. Can you imagine how scared she was? Her heart pounding. The king was sitting on his royal throne in the hall facing the entrance. When he saw Queen Esther standing in the court, he was pleased with her. There's that favor again, and held out to her the gold scepter that was in his hand. So Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter. Now there was something that I read as I was studying this that I just absolutely loved. She was scared. Esther was scared of going before the king. It was a risk. She was risking her life to go before the king. But what I read in studying this is you never have to worry about losing what God gave you when you take a risk that honors him. Man, I love that. I love that. If you're doing something for the Lord and there is fear that comes over you, that is from the enemy, and you never have to fear losing what you have if you risk for him and you take a risk that honors him. Love that. Remember that. So the favor was still on her. And the king said, come on in, tell me what you need. Then the king asked her, what is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom it would be given to you. If it pleases the king, replied Esther. Let the king, together with Haman, come today to a banquet I have prepared for him. Bring Haman at once, the king said, so that we may do what Esther asks. So the king and Haman went to the banquet Esther had prepared. As they were drinking wine, the king again asked Esther, now, what is your request? What is your petition? It will be given you. And what is your request? Even up to half the kingdom it will be granted. Esther replied, my petition and my request is this. Don't know if she planned it this way or not. Kind of seems like she got cold feet there for a minute. If the king regards me with favor, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition and fulfill my request, then let the king and Haman come tomorrow to another banquet I will prepare for them. Then I will answer the king's question. Haman went out that day happy and in high spirits. But when he saw Mordecai at the king's gate and observed that he neither rose nor showed fear in his presence, he was filled with rage against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home. Listen to this. Calling together his friends and Zeresh, his wife, Haman boasted to them about his vast wealth, his many sons, and all the ways the king had honored him, and how he had elevated him above the other nobles and officials. Pride, pride, pride. Oh, let's be careful of pride. And that's not all, Haman added. I'm the only person Queen Esther invited to accompany the king to the banquet she gave. And she has invited me along with the king tomorrow. But all this gives me no satisfaction as long as I see that Jew, Mordecai, sitting at the king's gate. His wife, Zeresh, and all her friends said to him, have a gallows built 75 feet high, and ask the king in the morning to have Mordecai hanged on it. Then go with the king to the dinner and be happy. This suggestion delighted Haman, and he had the gallows built. That was some fast building right there, all in one night. And I wrote out to the side of those last two verses, be careful who your friends are. You're about to find out why in just a minute. Chapter 6, verse 1, those first few words is where the hinge begins to turn, where the great door swings on small hinges. This is where the whole story begins to turn. This is the hinge point. This is the turning point right here. That night. Some of your translations may say during that night. The king could not sleep. Supernatural insomnia. So he ordered the book of the Chronicles, the record of his reign, to be brought in and read to him. How mind-numbing. But apparently he enjoyed it. It was found recorded there. Listen to this. The king who had his head in the sand, the doofus king, was told that it was recorded that Mordecai had exposed Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's officers who guarded the doorway, who conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. Now, do you remember back over here in chapter 2 at the end where I said, don't forget this, where the message was sent from Mordecai to Queen Esther about the two who were planning the assassination of the king, and Esther went to the king, reported to the king, and gave credit to Mordecai? And the king's like, yeah, okay, somebody's trying to kill me, kill them. It didn't matter where it came from, and he forgot that it was Mordecai, didn't care that it was Mordecai, and now it's being brought back to his attention through the supernatural providence of our God. And he says, oh, what honor and recognition has this Mordecai received for this? The king asked. Nothing has been done for him, his attendants answered. Doofus with your head in the sand. Then the king said, who's in the court? Apparently there was some noise and he heard something. Who's in the court? Now Haman had just entered. So do you remember in Ruth, I forget if it was chapter 2, and it says, and the hap was, do you remember that? And the hap was that she just happened to be working in the field of Boaz, who just happened to be in the family of Elimelech. Do you remember that? And the hap was, that is exactly what this is implying here. It just so happens, just chance of chances, that Haman had just entered the outer court of the palace. Now we're talking about early morning hours here because the king had been awake all night. All right, and Haman had too, because he had been up building the gallows, telling people what to do to build the gallows to hang Mordecai on, right? So this was early morning hours here, all right? He just so happened to enter the outer court of the palace to speak to the king about hanging Mordecai on the gallows he had erected for him. His attendants answered, Haman. Haman's the one that's standing out here in the court. Oh, bring him in, the king ordered. When Haman entered, the king asked him, what should be done for the man the king delights to honor? Now Haman thought to himself, who is there that the king would rather honor than me? So he answered the king, for the man the king delights to honor, have them bring a royal robe the king has worn, and a horse the king has ridden, one with a royal crest placed on its head. Then let the robe and horse be entrusted to one of the king's most noble princes. Then let them robe the man the king delights to honor, and lead him on a horse through the city streets. proclaiming before him, "This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor." And all the while, Haman's thinking, "It's me." And then the king says, "By golly, I like that idea. Go at once. Do all that you have said. Get the robe and the horse and do just what you suggested for Mordecai, the Jew, who sits at the king's gate." Are you wanting to stand on your feet and cheer right now? Because that's what I want to do every time I hear this story. Do not neglect anything you have recommended to Haman. So Haman got the robe and the horse. He robed Mordecai and led him on horseback through the city streets, proclaiming before him, "This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor." Can you imagine? It just cracked me up. Afterward, Mordecai returned to the king's gate. But Haman rushed home with his head covered in grief and told Zeresh, his wife, and all his friends everything that had happened. So this was the same people he was just with the night before who said, "Oh, you need to prepare a gallows for Mordecai and you need to have him hung. And then you just need to go be happy when you go into Esther's banquet with the king. Just go be happy. Just kill him and be done." All right, now he goes back to that same wife and that same group of friends. Remember I said, be careful who your friends are. And his advisors and his wife Zeresh said to him, "Since Mordecai, before whom your downfall has started, you're going down, dude, is of Jewish origin, you cannot stand against him." Now, they didn't say anything about that before. They're like, "That Mordecai, that Jew." Now they're like, dude, you're going down. And because he's Jewish, you can't stand against him. You will surely come to ruin. Wow, those kinds of friends, you don't need enemies. Yikes. While they were still talking with him, the king's eunuchs arrived and hurried Haman away to the banquet Esther had prepared. All of this is just happening like this. So the king and Haman went to dine with Queen Esther. And as they're drinking wine on that second day, the king again asked, "Queen Esther, all right, we're here. Tell me, what is your petition? It will be given to you. What's your request? Even up to half the kingdom it will be granted." Then Queen Esther answered, "If I have found favor with you, O king, and if it pleases your majesty, grant me my life. This is my petition." Can you imagine the king's face? He's like, "What do you want, you beautiful, amazing creature? I love to look at you. What do you want? I'll give you anything. I'll walk on hot coals for you. What do you want?" And she says, "I just want my life. That's my petition." Can you imagine the king looking at her completely bewildered? "And spare my people. This is my request. For I and my people have been sold for destruction and slaughter and annihilation. If we had merely been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept quiet, because no such distress would justify disturbing the king." In other words, if we would be content to be slaves, and that would be okay. But a whole campaign of slaughter has been set against me and my people. King Xerxes asked Queen Esther, Who did this? Who is the man and where is he who has dared to do such a thing?" Boom, boom, boom. Esther says, "The adversary and enemy is this vile Haman." Now, when you get a chance and you're ever able to go to a Purim festival, you need to go. Because at this point, all of the noisemakers are going, all the boos are going, all the yay boo, yay boo, yay boo are happening, and it is awesome. It is just amazing. So if you ever get a chance to go, please go. So we're at this moment, a critical moment where the music is and Haman, all the blood has drained out of him. He might have peed himself. Okay? He might have even peed himself. I would have. Then Haman was terrified before the king and queen. The king got up in rage, left his wine, and went out into the palace garden. Something makes me wonder right there if the king is not going, "Oh my gosh, I gave him my ring. I gave him the authority to do this. I gave him the authority to do this. He was the mastermind behind it, but I gave him my ring. I trusted him. Can't you just see him out in the garden pacing back and forth going, how did I let this happen? I had my head in the sand. I'm a doofus. How did I let this happen? I gave him my authority. I trusted him. But Haman, realizing that the king had already decided his fate, the coward that he was, he stayed behind to beg Queen Esther for his life. And then just as the king is coming back into the room, into the banquet hall, Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was reclining, begging her. The king exclaimed, will he even molest the queen while she is with me in my house? Like he's going to go and touch and grope on my wife now? Are you crazy? And he's just infuriated. And as soon as the word left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face with a cloth. And then Harbona, one of the eunuchs attending the king, said, oh, by the way, king, a gallows 75 feet high stands by Haman's house. He had it made for Mordecai, who spoke up to help you, by the way. And the king said, hang him on it. And in that very moment, they took Haman out and hanged him on the gallows he had prepared for Mordecai. Then the king's fury subsided. Oh, so sorry, Haman. All your plans came crashing down on you. I'm so sorry. So sorry. Oh my gosh. Chapter 8. That same day, King Xerxes gave Queen Esther the estate of Haman, the enemy of the Jews. Gave it to her. Just gave it to her. And Mordecai came into the presence of the king, for Esther had told how he was related to her. She finally had told, I'm a Jew. Mordecai's my cousin. He's Jewish. It said the king took off his signet ring that he had gotten back from Haman and presented it now to Mordecai. And Esther appointed him over Haman's estate. The enemy of the Jews. Now everything he had was in their hands. The providence of God. The hand that's in the glove of human events. Hello, good and evil, seen and unseen, animate and inanimate, every detail, whether it seems like catastrophe and destruction or at your doorstep, God's hand is in the glove of human events, and he will turn that thing around. Now remember, before we move on, listen, I know we're running over time, but this is the whole Megillah. Y'all hang with me. Don't lose me now. We're almost done. Remember when I said in chapter 6, that was the hinge, that was the turning point. Proverbs 21:1 says that the heart of the king is controlled by the Lord. That's my paraphrase, but the heart of the king, go look that up. Proverbs 21:1, the heart of the king is controlled by the Lord, and it's like a watercourse, a waterworks. He controls it as he wants to, okay? Now, if you know by that verse that the king's heart is controlled by our God, if his heart is controlled and in the hands of the Lord, the Lord, when you see that in the Old Testament where the Lord is all caps, L-O-R-D, all caps, that means Yahweh. That means I am. That the great I am has the heart of the king in his hands, and he directs it as a watercourse, and he's the most powerful man in the land. Then whose hand do you think maybe your boss's heart is in? Whose hand do you think your husband's heart is in? Whose hand do you think your kids' hearts are in as you pray for them and cry out to the Lord on their behalf? Whose hands do you think our president's heart is in? Agree with him or don't agree with him, it doesn't matter. His heart is in the hand of the Almighty, and he directs his course. Everything that's going on in your life, the Lord is directing for his purposes. His beautiful providential care is on your life. Whew. All right, now, then Esther again in chapter 3 of verse 8, Esther again pleaded with the king, falling at his feet and weeping. She begged him to put an end to the evil plan of Haman the Agagite, which he had devised against the Jews. Then the king extended the gold scepter to Esther, and she arose and stood before him. If it pleases the king, she said, and if he regards me with favor and thinks it the right thing to do, and if he is pleased with me, then let an order be written overruling the dispatches that Haman, son of Hammedatha the Haggagite, devised and wrote to destroy the Jews in all the king's provinces. Now you got to pay attention real close right there to something that is really key. We found out that Ruth was a true Ezra. Can I tell you right now? So was Esther. She knew exactly when and how to approach the king. She knew exactly what to say. She looked at him. She spoke with favor over him. She spoke with respect to him. Okay? And she said, if I'm regarded with favor in your eyes, and if you think it's the right thing to do, and if you're pleased with me. She had the right way to say things. She was a true Ezra. And so she goes on to say, for how can I bear to see disaster fall on my people? How can I bear to see the destruction of my family? Because remember, what the king has given authority with his signet ring could not be revoked. He had no way to revoke it. So he had to come up with another plan. So King Xerxes replies to Queen Esther and to Mordecai the Jew, because Haman attacked the Jews, I have given his estate to Esther, and they have hanged him on the gallows. Now, here's how we're going to figure this thing out. Here's how we're going to make it work. Mordecai, I want you to write another decree in the king's name in behalf of the Jews, as seems best to you, and seal it with the king's ring. For no document written in the king's name and sealed with his ring can be revoked. So what we're going to have to do is fight fire with fire. We're going to have to do this way, okay? At once the royal secretaries were summoned. On the 23rd day of the 3rd month, the month of Sivan, they wrote out all Mordecai's orders to the Jews and to the satraps, governors, and nobles of the 127 provinces stretching from India to Cush. These orders were written in the script of each province and the language of each people, and also to the Jews in their own script and language. Mordecai wrote in the name of King Xerxes, sealed the dispatches with the king's signet ring, and sent them by mounted couriers who rode fast horses, especially bred for the king. He's like, get these out, get it out now. The king's edict granted the Jews in every city the right to assemble and protect themselves, to destroy, kill, and annihilate. You want to destroy, kill, and annihilate them? Well, we're going to give them the right to destroy, kill, and annihilate any armed force of any nationality or province that might attack them and their women and children, and to plunder the property of their enemies. In other words, you have the right to defend yourself. Just like right now in this country, we still have the right to defend ourselves. You come to my house, unwanted, you might be staring down the barrel of a gun. I'm just saying, I got the right to defend myself, and that's what he was giving them the right to do. Okay, the day appointed for the Jews to do this in all the provinces of King Xerxes was in the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, the same day that all this was supposed to go down under Haman's orders. The king said, we're fighting fire with fire. On this day, you can defend yourself. A copy of the text of the edict was to be issued as law in every province and made known to the people of every nationality, so that the Jews would be ready on that day to avenge themselves and their enemies. The couriers riding the royal horses raced out, spurred on by the king's command, and the edict was also issued in the citadel of Susa. Now, Mordecai left the king's presence wearing royal garments of blue and white, a large crown of gold, and a purple robe of fine linen. In the city of Susa held a joyous celebration for the Jews. It was a time of happiness and joy and gladness and honor. In every province and in every city, wherever the edict of the king went, there was joy and gladness among the Jews, with feasting and celebration. And many people under other nationalities became Jews because fear of the Jews had seized them. Now hear me. You better love the Jewish people. You're a believer in Jesus, you've been grafted in. We better love them, because God is still that fiercely on their side. I'm just saying. Chapter 9. On the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, the edict commanded by the king was to be carried out. On this day, the enemies of the Jews had hoped to overpower them, but now the tables were turned. that big door, great doors are swing on little hinges. He makes great doors swing on little hinges. There it is. And now the tables had been turned, and the Jews got the upper hand over those who hated them. The Jews assembled in their cities and all the provinces of King Xerxes to attack those seeking their destruction. No one could stand against them because the people of all the other nationalities were afraid of them. And all the nobles of the provinces, the satraps, the governors, and the king's administrators helped the Jews. You got to remember, they were the ones that Haman got their authority, their approval to, along with the king, to help send out that first edict. Now they were turned around to help the Jews because fear of Mordecai had seized them. Mordecai was prominent in the palace. His reputation spread throughout the provinces, and he became more and more powerful. Now it goes on to talk about the Jews struck down all their enemies. They killed hundreds. Go on down. And then it gets down to verse 11. The number of those slain in the citadel of Susa was reported to the king the same. Oh, sorry. I don't want to miss this. Okay, so the Jews killed and destroyed 500 men within the citadel of Susa. They also killed all of the sons of Haman. The 10 sons of Haman, they killed them, the enemy of the Jews, but they did not lay their hands on the plunder. Okay? The number of those slain in the citadel of Susa was reported to the king that same day. The king said to Queen Esther, the Jews have killed and destroyed 500 men and the 10 sons of Haman in the citadel of Susa. What have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? Now, what is your petition? It will be given you. What is your request? It will also be granted to you. If it pleases the king, she answered again, Esther, give the Jews in Susa permission to carry out this day's edict tomorrow also. Like there's more coming after them. Give them another day, okay? And let Haman's 10 sons, even though they're already dead, let them hang from the gallows too, as a sign. All right, so the king commanded that this be done. An edict was issued in Susa, and they hanged the 10 sons of Haman. The Jews in Susa came together on the 14th day, the next day, and they put to death in Susa 300 men, but they did not lay hands on the plunder. Meanwhile, the remainder of the Jews in all the other provinces also assembled to protect themselves and get relief for their enemies. So they killed 75,000 of those who came to kill them. They killed 75,000, but did not lay hands on the plunder. This happened on the 13th day of the month of Adar. And then it goes on to say, this is why, and they did this, and they had made it a day of feasting. This is why rural Jews, those living in villages, observe the 14th of the month of Adar as a day of joy and feasting, a day for giving presents to each other. Now, as we end this up, Mordecai recorded these events, and he sent letters to all the Jews throughout the province of the king Xerxes, near and far, to have them celebrate annually the 14th and the 15th days of the month of Adar as the time when the Jews got relief from their enemies, and as the month when their sorrow was turned into joy and their mourning into a day of celebration. It makes me think of Isaiah 61. He wrote them to observe the days as days of feasting and joy and giving presents of food to one another and gifts to the poor. So the Jews agreed to continue the celebration they had begun, doing what Mordecai had written to them. For Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of all the Jews, had plotted against the Jews to destroy them and had cast the pur, that is the lot, for their ruin and destruction. But when the plot came to the king's attention, he issued written orders that the evil scheme Haman had devised against the Jews should come back to his own head, and that he and his son should be hanged on the gallows. Therefore, these days were called Purim, from the word pure, because of everything written in this letter and because of what they had seen and what had happened to them. The Jews took it upon themselves to establish the custom that they and their descendants and all who joined them should without fail observe these 2 days every year in the way prescribed and at the time appointed. These days should be remembered and observed in every generation by every family and in every province and in every city. And these days of Purim should never cease to be celebrated by the Jews, nor should the memory of them die out among the descendants. Esther and Mordecai were looking out for the next generations. Tell them what happened. Tell them what happened. And so now this festival continues to this day because it said, may it never cease to be celebrated by the Jews. So Queen Esther, daughter of Abihail, along with Mordecai the Jew, wrote with full authority to confirm the second letter concerning Purim, and Mordecai sent letters to all the Jews to establish these days of Purim at their designated times as Mordecai the Jew and Queen Esther had decreed for them. Now skip right down to the little bitty section of chapter 10. King Xerxes imposed tribute throughout the empire to its distant shores, and all his acts of power and might, together with a full account of the greatness of Mordecai to which the king had raised him, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Media and Persia? All this is written down. Mordecai the Jew was second in rank. Does that sound like someone else? Joseph? Hello? Ring a bell? Great doors swing on little hinges when God's in control. He was second in rank to King Xerxes, preeminent among the Jews, and held in high esteem by his many fellow Jews because he worked for the good of his people and spoke up for the welfare of all the Jews. Yes! And the noisemakers resound and the yays and the celebration. And all the little kids are dressed up in their little costumes. There's little Mordecais all over the place. And there's little Esthers all over the place. And they are so precious. And they have these little cookies that they call Hamandaschen cookies. And in the center of it is like red, like blood. You know, it's not kind of gross. But it's supposed to look like it's the death of Haman. And everybody's eating the Hamandaschen cookies. And it's just this huge, wonderful, triumphant celebration that they still celebrate to this day. It is just just beautiful. I love this story. I know we have gone this is a record-breaking night. We have gone way over than we ever have. But thank you for those of you who stuck with me. What a great story. Now, next week, we are going to start a new study. Not sure how many weeks it'll be. Probably somewhere in the ballpark of where we were with Ruth. That's my guess right now. But we are going to be studying someone that most of us, if I said her name right now, you wouldn't know. Jochebed. Anybody know who Jochebed was? Jochebed was Moses' mom. We're going to study Jochebed. We are diving into a few of these amazing Ezras in Scripture. Ones that we know, ones that we don't know. I am just so excited to do this with y'all next week. Jochebed, are you ready? I hope you enjoyed Esther tonight. I love you so much. Keep your shield oiled. Keep your sword sharp. You do have a glorious marriage. You do have a glorious life. You are an overcomer. You are an Ezer. No matter what you're doing, the providential hand of God is on your life. Okay? And don't forget, God makes great doors swing on little hinges. I love you guys. In Jesus' name. Good night.